For 20 years, you lived in pain, Maxwell said, his voice low with emotion. But today, I want to rewrite that story. I want to honor you, empower you, and remind you that your past does not define your future. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you found the video interesting. Once upon a time, in a small village with dusty roads and houses with rusty zinc roofs, there lived a couple named Mr. and Mrs. Obasi. They had been married for 5 years, but their home was silent. There were no sounds of babies, no laughter, and no joy. Despite trying everything herbs, fasting, prayers, the couple had no children. One rainy afternoon, Mr. Obasi quietly said to his wife, "Maybe it's time we adopt." They decided to visit a nearby orphanage. Among many crying babies, one little girl caught their attention. She had the brightest eyes and the calmest face. Her name was Eva. She was just 2 years old. They decided to adopt her, and their home felt warm once again. For a while, Eva brought joy into their lives. However, 3 years later, something unexpected happened. Mrs. Obasi became pregnant. Her joy overflowed as she walked around the house, singing and rubbing her belly. "God has remembered me," she shouted with excitement. After a year, Mrs. Obasi gave birth to twins. She named them Chuka and Soma. The whole town celebrated their arrival, and Mr. Obasi was so happy that he danced in circles, falling over from joy. Not long after, they had a baby girl named Kamsi. Their home, which had once been empty, was now filled with children. But Eva was no longer treated the same. Mrs. Obasi began to change. She grew cold and harsh towards Eva. She would scold her for the smallest things and ignore her when she cried. She gave Eva tiny portions of food, sometimes even sour meals. Eva had no choice but to eat whatever was given to her. Duma, one of their neighbors, noticed the mistreatment. Duma had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and she watched closely. She saw how Mrs. Obasi treated Eva and decided to secretly help. Whenever Mrs. Obasi was away, Duma's children would bring food to Eva. As the years passed, Eva grew into a beautiful young woman. The twins, Chuka and Soma, were now 16, and Kamsi was 17. Mrs. Obasi enrolled her children in jam lessons to prepare them for the next stage of their education, but Eva was left behind, as she wasn't their biological child. One afternoon, fate took a surprising turn. Soma, one of the twins, came home from class early for no apparent reason. He found Eva sleeping on the couch, alone. Without hesitation, he took advantage of the situation and raped her. Eva cried all night, but Soma threatened to kill her if she told anyone, claiming that he was involved with a dangerous cult. Terrified, Eva kept the incident to herself. 2 months later, she began feeling sick, nauseous, weak, and dizzy. Mrs. Obasi noticed these changes and suspected that Eva was pregnant. She took her to the hospital, where the doctor confirmed that Eva was 2 months pregnant. When they returned home, Mrs. Obasi demanded to know who had gotten Eva pregnant. Eva was too scared to speak the truth. Soma had threatened to kill her if she revealed what had happened. After much pressure, Eva finally trembled as she spoke. "Your son raped me." Mrs. Obasi's face turned red with anger. "How dare you accuse my son of such a thing?" she shouted. Tears filled Eva's eyes. She had no one to turn to. No one believed her. Mr. Obasi called Soma and asked him if he was responsible for Eva's pregnancy. Soma denied everything. With no evidence, no one believed Eva's story. From that day on, she was treated even worse by everyone in the house. The pain was unbearable, and all Eva could do was cry. 2 weeks later, Mr. Obasi overheard his friends talking about a disabled man who was looking for a wife. Interested, he decided to offer Eva to this man before her pregnancy became noticeable. He quickly got the man's contact information and called him. The man answered, and Mr. Obasi said, "I heard you're looking for a wife." The man replied, "Yes, I am." Mr. Obasi responded, "I think I have one for you." They agreed on a meeting, and the man would come to Mr. Obasi's house the next morning. The next day, the man arrived in a tricycle, sitting in a wheelchair. After the usual greetings, Mr. Obasi served him cola, and they began to talk. Soon, the man asked to see the girl Eva. Maxwell, the man in the wheelchair, was only 32. but he was very handsome. When Eva came out, she looked unkempt and broken. Maxwell looked at her and then glanced at the other children in the house, who were all neatly dressed. He frowned and asked, "Why does she look this way, while the rest of your children are dressed so nicely?" Mr. and Mrs. Obasi tried to make excuses, but Maxwell saw through their lies. He asked, "Have you told Eva the reason I'm here?" Mr. Obasi stammered, "Not exactly." Maxwell turned to Eva and said softly, "I want to marry you." Eva stood frozen in place, not knowing what to say. She turned and ran to the backyard, where she cried bitterly. She picked up a handful of sand and whispered, "Since the moment I came into this house, I have always been kind to them. But they have repaid my kindness with cruelty. They will never know peace." She squeezed the sand tightly in her hand and continued, "Soma, you raped me and got me pregnant, then denied it in front of your parents. Because of that, you will never hear the cry of a baby in your house." Eva slowly dropped the sand, wiped her face, and gathered her things. She returned to Maxwell and said, "Yes, I will marry you, but there's something you must know first." Mr. and Mrs. Obasi stood still, knowing their secret was about to be exposed. Eva took a deep breath and began, "Mr. Maxwell, you say you want to marry me, but you need to know this. I am 2 months pregnant. My so-called parents are trying to marry me off to you because their son raped me, got me pregnant, and denied it." They both supported his lies. Mr. and Mrs. Obasi lowered their heads in shame. Eva stepped closer to Mr. Obasi, looked him in the eye, and said, "You were supposed to be a father to me, but instead your wife has controlled your mind and turned you into a wicked man." She turned to Soma, her eyes filled with both pain and strength, and said, "You monster! You raped me, got me pregnant, and threatened me into silence. Today, I am leaving your house, but mark my words, you will never hear a baby cry in your home." Eva knelt in front of Maxwell and asked softly, "Would you still want to marry me after hearing all of this?" Maxwell, moved by her courage, gently held her hand. Then, in a surprising move, he stood up from his wheelchair. Everyone in the house froze in shock. Maxwell turned to Mr. and Mrs. Obasi and said, "I am not disabled. I was only pretending. I wanted to see who truly deserved to be my wife." He took out his phone, made a call, and within minutes, a black SUV Jeep arrived. Maxwell paid Eva's bride price right there. He took her hand and helped her into the car, driving straight to his mansion. Mr. and Mrs. Obasi were left in tears, filled with shame. At Maxwell's mansion, Eva was amazed by the beauty and size of the house. Everything sparkled like gold, and maids rushed to help her settle in. Maxwell had already bought her expensive clothes, shoes, and jewelry. It was a world she had never dreamed of. From that day on, Eva's life changed. She felt peace for the first time in years. Her face began to glow with happiness, and the sadness in her eyes slowly disappeared. One morning, the maids in the kitchen taught her how to prepare delicious meals. Maxwell loved good food, and Eva was determined to make him happy. She quickly adjusted to her new life, and every corner of the mansion was filled with beauty and comfort. One day, while preparing breakfast, Maxwell walked into the kitchen, watching her with a soft smile. Eva, now looking even more beautiful with luxurious hair, sparkling jewelry, and fine clothes, remained humble and kind, no matter her new wealth. Maxwell loved Eva deeply, and she loved him just as much. Their bond grew stronger every day. Soon, Eva was 8 months pregnant, and Maxwell was overjoyed. He prepared for their baby's arrival by buying all the necessary items. When the 9th month arrived, Eva went into labor. The house was filled with excitement, and later that day she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Maxwell cried tears of joy, holding his son. He thanked Eva for this blessing and surprised her with a new car as a gift. Throughout their time together, Maxwell never brought up Eva's past. He loved her completely and unconditionally. To him, she and their son were his whole world. As the years passed, Eva and Maxwell's love only grew stronger, and their family continued to flourish. The pain of her past had been healed by the love and care of a true family. They were finally at peace, and Eva knew she had found her true home. 2 years had passed since Eva married Maxwell, a kind and reserved man who had quietly walked into her broken world and rebuilt it brick by brick. In those 2 years, Eva had blossomed emotionally, mentally, and physically. She smiled more, cried less, and most importantly, she began to heal from the scars of her past. Maxwell had long planned something special for her. One crisp golden morning, as the sun filtered through their bedroom blinds, he turned to Eva with a soft smile and said, "Darling, dress up. We're going somewhere important today." Eva looked at him, puzzled. "Where are we going?" she asked, already reaching for her gown. "You'll see," Maxwell replied, brushing a gentle kiss on her forehead. She dressed elegantly in a navy blue dress, simple but classy, her hair pulled into a low bun. She wore light makeup, and her skin glowed with a quiet confidence Maxwell had grown to admire. They got into the car and drove in silence, save for the soft hum of the radio. Eva looked outside, admiring the passing streets, still unaware of where they were heading. But as they turned into a gated compound and approached a towering building with shimmering glass walls, her eyes caught the sign. Maxwell Oil and Gas Company. She blinked. A strange feeling crept into her chest. She turned to Maxwell with a confused look. "Darling, where are we?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. Maxwell smiled, that knowing smile that had always given her comfort. "Come with me," he said, stepping out and circling the car to open her door. Hand in hand, they walked into the building. The moment they stepped into the lobby, all the employees straightened up. "Good morning, sir," they chorused, their voices echoing through the grand reception. Eva's eyes widened. She looked around, still in disbelief. Everyone seemed to revere her husband. She squeezed his hand. "You're the Maxwell in Maxwell Oil and Gas?" she asked in a hushed voice. He chuckled softly and said, "Let's go to my office." They rode the elevator in silence. Eva's heart pounded, not just with surprise, but something deeper, something healing. When they entered his spacious office, Maxwell motioned for her to sit. He walked over to his desk, opened a drawer, and brought out a cream-colored envelope. Then he turned to face her, his expression tender. "For 20 years you lived in pain," Maxwell said, his voice low with emotion. "But today, I want to rewrite that story. I want to honor you, empower you, and remind you that your past does not define your future." Tears began to gather in Eva's eyes. Before they could fall, Maxwell picked up a silk handkerchief and gently dabbed her cheeks, careful not to smudge her makeup. Then he stood and extended his hand. "Come with me," he said. "It's time." Eva placed her trembling hand in his, stood up, and followed him down to the company's main hall. The employees had already gathered. Maxwell stood beside her with quiet pride. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "today is special. I want to introduce someone who means everything to me. From today forward, this company will be under the management of a woman I trust with my life, my wife, Eva Maxwell." The room erupted in applause. Eva, overwhelmed, dropped to her knees and sobbed openly. Then, for the first time ever, she looked up at Maxwell and said, "My lord." Maxwell quickly helped her up, held her shoulders, and said, "You don't need to kneel for me. You've already honored me more than I deserve." She threw her arms around him, and they embraced as the applause continued. That day marked a new beginning, not just in her career, but in her life. Later that evening, they returned home, shared a delicious meal, and laughed like two old souls rediscovering joy. 5 years later, time passed swiftly. Eva became a celebrated manager, smart, efficient, and deeply compassionate. Under her leadership, Maxwell Oil and Gas flourished, gaining reputation for both excellence and integrity. But in all these years, Eva never reached out to her former neighbor, Mrs. Obasi, or her children, Soma and Chuma. Some wounds ran too deep, and some silences carried the weight of betrayal and trauma too heavy to revisit. Now, Maxwell Oil and Gas had begun a fresh recruitment process. The company was expanding, and new engineers were needed. Coincidentally, Soma and Chuma had just completed their degrees in petrochemical engineering. With hopeful hearts and updated CVs, they learned of the recruitment drive at Maxwell Oil and Gas. unaware that Eva was not only the manager, but also the wife of the company's owner. The two brothers dressed in their best clothes and set out for their opportunity. They reached the company early. Soma stepped forward and asked one of the front desk staff, "Please, where do we submit our CVs?" The staff smiled and pointed down the corridor. "That way, manager's office." With confident strides, Soma made his way to the door. He knocked. "Come in," a familiar voice replied. He stepped in and froze. Sitting behind the desk was Eva. Her face had matured with grace, but it was unmistakably her. Soma stood motionless, his hand still holding the CV. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. His tongue felt dry. Every memory he had spent years suppressing flooded back in an instant. Eva looked up. Their eyes met. There was a long, painful silence. Soma opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Just then, the door opened behind him. Maxwell walked in, flipping through some documents. "Good afternoon, sir," Soma stammered, trying to compose himself. Maxwell looked up. He studied the young man's face for a moment. There was something familiar about him, but he couldn't place it. Eva, still seated, turned to her husband. "Darling, don't you recognize him?" Maxwell furrowed his brows and shook his head. "No, I don't. Who is he?" Eva's lips trembled. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "He is the one who raped me, the son of Mr. and Mrs. Obasi." Maxwell's face changed. Shock, then pain, then controlled anger. He turned to Eva, searching her face to be sure. Soma immediately fell to his knees. "Please, please forgive me," he cried, his voice thick with guilt. "I was young. I didn't know better. I've regretted it every day of my life." Maxwell said nothing for a long moment. Then he turned to Eva and gently said, "Handle it your way," before walking out of the office. Silence returned. Eva looked down at the CV in her hand. For a long time, she didn't say a word. Then she stood up, walked over to Soma, and held out the CV. "Leave my office," she said quietly. "Please, Eva." He tried again. "Leave," she repeated, her voice now firm. Soma stood up slowly, took the document, and left with his head bowed in shame. He returned home broken. That evening, he sat with his parents and told them everything that had happened. The confrontation, the rejection, the truth Eva had finally spoken. Mr. and Mrs. Obasi sat in stunned silence, their past staring them dead in the face. Their eyes welled with tears not just for their son's lost opportunity, but for the deep pain they had caused by turning a blind eye years ago. Karma had found its way back. As Soma returned home, broken and ashamed, his parents Mr. and Mrs. Obasi listened in stunned silence. His mother collapsed into a chair, shaking her head in disbelief. His father stood still, staring into nothing, the truth crashing down like thunder. "We thought it was buried, that she had forgotten," Mrs. Obasi whispered. But Eva had not forgotten. That face, those hands, that pain, they haunted her every night. And now, karma had brought her justice without her lifting a finger. Later that evening, Maxwell and Eva sat in their living room. Maxwell looked at her with quiet intensity. "What are you going to do?" he asked gently. Eva stared at the flames dancing in the fireplace, her fingers trembling. "I don't know," she replied. "I want him to suffer, but not the way I suffered. I want him to learn." Maxwell nodded, trusting her judgment, but he had something else in mind. Meanwhile, Soma couldn't sleep. Desperation ate at him. That job was his only shot to save his dying father's business. With debts rising and the Obasi name now soiled, his mind spiraled into panic. Then a knock came at their gate. It was a tall man in a black suit. He handed Mr. Obasi an envelope and left without a word. Inside was a letter, stamped with a seal of Maxwell Oil and Gas. It read, "Mr. Soma Obasi is invited to an exclusive leadership retreat at the Haven Lodge. Attendance is mandatory if he still wishes to be considered for employment." Confused, Soma packed his bag and left for the retreat, still hoping, still desperate. The Haven Lodge a trap or a test? The retreat was isolated, luxurious, yet eerily quiet. Only a few others were there, young men and women, all wearing worried expressions. A tall woman in black walked in. It was Eva, but she was not the Eva they remembered. She looked fierce, untouchable, like a queen forged in fire. You are all here because you carry histories you thought were buried. Before you receive anything from this company, we must dig them out tone by one. That night, each person was summoned individually for questioning. When it was Soma's turn, Eva asked just one question. If you could go back, would you still pretend it didn't happen? Soma sobbed. I was young, foolish, influenced, but I was wrong, and I've paid every day since. Please, give me a chance to make it right. Eva said nothing. The next day, she sent all applicants home except Soma. He remained confused until Maxwell arrived. We have one more test, he said. Soma was taken to a local village clinic where he was told to assist in humanitarian relief for 3 months. No pay, no title, just service. If he failed or walked away, he'd never be hired anywhere in the industry again. Meanwhile, Mr. Obasi received a court summons. Eva had quietly reopened her rape case, now backed with the power and lawyers of Maxwell Oil and Gas. Witnesses had been found. The Obasis were in trouble. But the court date wasn't for Soma. It was for his parents, who had covered the crime and silenced Eva years ago with threats. Maxwell had dug deep, and the truth was bleeding into daylight. 3 months later, Soma, now gaunt and humbled, returned from the clinic. He walked into Maxwell's office with a new light in his eyes, not entitlement, but remorse. Eva stood beside her husband. Do you still want to work here? She asked. Only if I can use the position to protect women, Soma said. Eva looked into his eyes. There was pain, regret, change. She turned to Maxwell. Let's give him a position in the foundation, she said. Let his redemption begin where my pain started. Maxwell agreed. Justice had been served, not with revenge but with transformation. Because sometimes karma doesn't kill. It teaches. The courtroom remained still after the verdict, but before the judge could rise, Barrister Ijeoma stood again. Your Honor, with your permission, my client would like to pursue a civil lawsuit against Mr. and Mrs. Obasi for emotional trauma, defamation, and intentional obstruction of justice, along with damages. Whispers erupted. The judge nodded. The court will hear it. Proceed. Eva takes the stand again. She walked up slowly, calm, regal, and this time angry. I want the world to know how long silence lived in me. I want them to understand that you don't bury abuse, you carry it into every relationship, every mirror, every moment. Her voice trembled. They didn't just ignore what happened, they made it worse. They called me possessed. They let their son mock me. They painted me as a liar when I was just a child screaming for help. She pulled out a faded notebook, her childhood diary. I wrote in here. The room went still as she read out loud one heartbreaking line. Maybe if I die, someone will finally believe me. Even the judge looked down for a moment. Mrs. Obasi sobbed quietly, now not from guilt, but from fear. Then came Soma's turn. Soma confesses fully. Unexpectedly, Soma stood. Your Honor, I want to say something. Please. The judge raised a brow. You're not required to testify further. I know, Soma said, trembling, but I need to. He took the stand. Silence fell. Eva didn't lie. I forced myself on her. I was 17. I thought it was funny. My parents covered it up. I knew it was wrong. But I never said a word. Not for 10 years. I'm not here to be guy, just want to admit it finally. Maxwell stiffened in the crowd. If there's a punishment, give it to me. If not, I'll live with what I did every single day. Tears fell freely from Eva's eyes, but she didn't say a word. The courtroom was stunned. The Obasis turned on each other. Now, under pressure, Mr. Obasi snapped at his wife. You said we had it handled. I did it for Soma, Mrs. Obasi screamed back. We had a name to protect. The judge pounded the gavel. Order. The Obasis were handcuffed. This time, their pride broke entirely. As they were led away, Mrs. Obasi turned to Eva. We're sorry, please, forgive us. Eva stared at her for a long, painful second. I already did. But forgiveness doesn't cancel consequences. A different kind of justice. Outside, crowds waited. The press was everywhere. But Eva didn't stop for the microphones. She walked straight into the arms of a small group of teenage girl survivors from her foundation. They hugged her tightly. "You did it," one whispered. "You gave us a voice." Maxwell stood a few steps away, watching the woman he married become a symbol of strength. The court later awarded Eva financial damages money she used to build a rehabilitation center for survivors of abuse. She named it The Haven. Soma quietly volunteered at the center later, taking out trash, cleaning floors, never asking for thanks, just trying to redeem what he could. Eva never smiled at him, but she never chased him away either. And that, for Soma, was the beginning of his own sentence and maybe redemption.